In 1947, multiple distress signals were sent out to different countries, and so the international listening station got together and managed to pinpoint where this signal was coming from. Once rescue ships got to the area where the signal was sent out from, they got to a boat, and little did they know, this story that I'm about to tell you today would become one of the most famous stories ever told. But before we begin, if you're a fan of true crime stories or just scary stories in general, then I'd highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, because that's all I do, and I upload once a week. But with all that being said, let's begin. Today's story begins in 1947, and at the time everybody was trying to recover from World War II. An Englishman was listening to his radio, but this radio wasn't just any ordinary radio, it was a special radio. It was mainly used for distress signals or any Morse code signals. For example, if a boat or a vessel was stranded out in the ocean, they would send out a signal, and people like the Englishman would decipher this code, and if this vessel needed help, the man would send out help. So the Englishman was just sitting on his chair until he got a distress signal, and the signal contained a message which was again in Morse code. And this is what the message contained. The message said, "We float, all officers, including the captain, dead in the chart room, and on the bridge, probable the whole crew dead." And then there was a bit of silence before it went, "I died." Then the radio went silent. So the man was just terrified and quite frankly confused. One of the ships that was kinda close to this signal heard this message as well, and that ship was called the Silver Star. And the Silver Star was an American ship that was patrolling through the coast of Malaysia. So the Englishman told the captain of the Silver Star that something bad must have happened. So the captain and the Englishman got the neighboring ships together, and with the help of those other ships and the other listening station that were nearby, they all managed to triangulate where the distress signal could have came from. So after more time of trying to pinpoint where the exact location was, they managed to figure out that this ship was named the SS Ourang Medan. This ship was located in a bit of ocean called the Mall, and this part of the ocean was mainly used for ships to go over to the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. And when they kind of figured out where this ship was, they noticed that this ship was just floating to the Indian Ocean. And so confused, the captain of the Silver Star sent out a message to the SS Ourang Medan, but either the message wouldn't go through or they would just get ignored. So they tried to keep sending messages over, but after a while the captain of the Silver Star decided that we need to go investigate because something's up. So the Silver Star sends out another message to all the other neighboring ships, telling them that we're going to go there and investigate. And the Silver Star actually got a message back from one of the other neighboring ships, which the message said that this isn't a good idea and it feels like a trap. But the captain of the Silver Star ignored these valid questions and set off. And after a while of just heading straight towards Ourang Medan, they get to a point where they see a ship just coming out from the fog, and with a glance the crew knew that there's something wrong with this ship. And the creepiest part was the eerie sound of the empty ship just sailing in the ocean. And not to mention the fact that if a ship's passing by, usually there's people on the deck watching over or looking at the ship coming towards them. But in this case, there wasn't. It was just an empty ship. This just gave the Silver Star crew a chilling feeling. Now eventually the Silver Star crew would get next to the ship and began to call out that, "Hey, we're here, we're going to help you." And once they shouted this message, they were fully expecting someone to call back, but they didn't get a response. And this is when the rescue team began to get a bit scared, because if no one's on the ship, who the hell gave them the distress signal? But after mustering some courage, the captain of the Silver Star told his men that we need to go on board. But before we get on board, let's keep shouting and hope that someone actually hears us and maybe we get a response. So that's what they did for 10 minutes and still didn't get a response. So they were left with that one choice of going on aboard and see what the heck is going on with this ship. So that's what they did. All the Silver Star men got on board, and as they were climbing up on board, they all had a sinking feeling that whatever that was on this ship wasn't good. So the captain, who was at the front, was going up step by step until he reached to the final step, and his head was poking over the deck, and he could clearly see that there were a lot of deceased men. But this wasn't the weird part. Men being deceased in a ship is very explainable. There's many ways someone could die, but just the way the men were positioned was truly horrifying. The deceased men were all placed on their backs and their arms stretched out upwards, almost like they were trying to fight something or defend from whoever or whatever that was attacking them. To make things even worse, the deceased men had a terrified look on their faces, and usually a deceased person has like a blank expression to their face, but these men's faces were like a vivid image of what they last seen. So whatever these men were running from or fighting from must have been so terrifying that it left the men's faces paralyzed with their last moments before ultimately dying. So the Silver Star men kept walking around and they found the ship's dog, and well, unfortunately that dog was deceased as well, and it also had that terrified expression on it. And once again the dog was looking up, terrified from whoever that was attacking it. So the men were just creeped out at this point, and they were just looking at each other, asking to each other what the heck happened to these men, and what creature could have done such a thing. So they make their way up to the bridge of the ship, and just like the men on the deck, there was deceased men on the bridge as well, and once again with their backs on the floor and their arms stretched out, trying to fight from whoever or whatever that was trying to attack them. So they walked past the deceased men and went to the place where the distress signal was made, and there, slouched over, was the man who made the distress signal, and he was also deceased, and his finger was over the telegraph where the distress signal was made. So now the men have explored the top of the ship. They go down to the boiler room, and well, in most boiler rooms they're pretty warm because there's no ventilation. So as the men open the door to the boiler room, they automatically notice that this boiler room was pretty cold, and it was actually that cold in the boiler room that the inside of the boiler room was actually colder than the outside, which is heavily unusual for boiler rooms. And also they found even more deceased crew members, and again they were all in the same position with the same faces on them. So the Silver Star men kept on walking around, and they noticed that the ship itself hadn't really been broken into or hadn't received any damages to it. It just looks like the ship has just been turned off. And the crew also decided to examine the deceased men's bodies, and that's when they noticed that these deceased men had no attack marks or any scratches on them, which you would automatically think because the men looked like they were fighting from something. In addition to that, the deceased crew members were in a rapid state of decomposing, considering that they only got a distress signal a couple of hours ago, unless the person that was sending out the signal was the last person alive, and he was alive for a long time. But either way, these men have been deceased for a couple of weeks, and the state of decomposing that they were in, they shouldn't be in it, so it doesn't really add up. So after examining everything from the men to the ship and the no marks that were on the men, the captain of the Silver Star decided that let's not touch anything, and told his men to tie a tow line to their ship. The captain wanted experts to look at this because they had no idea themselves. So the Silver Star crew began to do what they were told, and it wasn't when they finished and everything was ready to set sail when the men turned around and seen the Ourang Medan smoking. So the men in a state of shock were just watching as the Ourang Medan was just filling up with smoke, and when the Silver Star ship began to move, the Ourang Medan just explodes, and not just a small explosion. The explosion actually took the Silver Star ship off the water, and the explosion also shot the Ourang Medan even higher up in the sky, where it come crashing down and just sink straight underwater. So again, the men were just left stunned because they don't know what to tell the neighboring ships and the commanders back at their base, because now you have no evidence of the ship since that's just randomly blown up, and you have no testimony since everybody on the ship was deceased. So the men went back onto the mainland and tried to explain on what the hell just happened, and the people that were intrigued by this story were also confused, and they also had a bit of doubt if the men were telling the truth, because again there were no evidence, and what the men were telling was truly baffling and paranormal. But unfortunately that's just the mystery. But the people that actually kind of believe this story believe that this is just a legend. Why? Because there wasn't really a good record of the Ourang Medan existing. Lloyd's shipping register is where basically any ship that's made and gets to set sail on the ocean is registered on there, and obviously since the Ourang Medan was on the ocean, you would think that the ship was registered on there, but it wasn't. Other people believe that the ship did exist and it was carrying some illegal substances such as nitroglycerin and potassium cyanide, which all these chemicals were used to make weapons. So whoever the crew were knew that if we ever get caught or somehow die, they would rig the ship with explosives, or the actual chemicals inside the ship just leaked, killing everybody, which also kind of solves the no wounds on the men. It could be a possibility, but unfortunately who knows, and we probably will never know. But that will be it for today's video. If you're a fan of true crime stories or just scary stories, then I'd highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And while you're at that, you might as well like the video and also comment below on your theories about this story, and also share this video as I'm trying to hit my 100 subscriber goal. And also, before I end the video, a quick shout out to all 56 subscribers. When I started this YouTube channel, I wasn't really expecting to grow this quick, but thanks to you guys I am, so I appreciate that. But with all that being said, thank you for watching, and yeah, goodbye.